Hello. If you'd like to use the oral participation evaluation spreadsheet and you need to know how to set it up and how to use it on a daily basis, this is how it's done. First, the setup. Okay, here we are at the ulat.com website. If you'd like to use the system that I've created for keeping track of oral participation in class, you first go to the teacher's manual and then you scroll down and find teacher resources. Now there are two different sheets that you'd want to download. They're both spreadsheets. The first is a fairly simple one. It's called the seating chart and record keeping spreadsheet. You could have your own system, of course, but this is just one which may be helpful to you. I'm going to open it now, and if you saw the fourth video in this series of 4 videos on effective world language education, this, by the way, this video is found at the top of that list, the table of contents for the teacher's manual. Well, in the 4th video, I explained how to use this particular spreadsheet, but I'll just give you another brief explanation at this time. The spreadsheet, which would be copied onto a piece of paper, photocopied for many different class periods, contains room for 6 different classes, 3 on the front, 3 on the back. Here's the first of those classes right here. You note at the top, I would enter in here, for example, I enter here the number 1 to indicate this is the first class of the day. I would put that in, of course, before photocopying it. Class number 2 would be entered here, etc. Whatever hour of the day you happen to have that class. And then let's take again the first class exclusively. I'm going to enter in here my students' names. Let's say Bob, Jim, Mary, and Sue. I'll just go that far. Within these rectangles corresponding to each student, I'll be adding a certain amount of information in the course of my class period. First of all, some of this information will not be entered whatsoever in the spreadsheet dealing with oral participation. It's there rather for your attendance purposes. But I would add in an A within the rectangle for an absence, a T for a tardy, and an E if the student is excused in the midst of class for whatever reason. A horizontal line if I want to keep track of times when a student interrupted instruction, had some form of negative behavior that disrupted the class. Again, that has nothing to do necessarily with the oral participation sheet. However, it's helpful for just your own record keeping purposes, either attendance or behavioral. And then finally, although it's not indicated here at the top in this little key here, I put hash marks within each of these rectangles for the quantity of times that a student contributes an idea, participates orally in the course of the class period. Now, I also want to mention, this is, I think, pretty significant. I myself don't manipulate this sheet. I don't fill out the sheet myself. I give it to a different student on a clipboard every day. I print off the sheet, I photocopy it, I put 1 sheet per day on the clipboard, and then I give it to a different student in each class. And that student is the student who's responsible for filling out the information for me. That's going to rotate so that every day it's a different student who's doing that and providing that information for me. It's really important that you give a student the role of filling this out, because you want to have your hands free and you want to have eye contact with your students. You don't want to be looking down at a chart. You don't want to be filling out a chart while class is going on. You need your hands free for the purpose of gesturing, for the purpose of conveying visually the meaning to your students, and so delegate this task to a student in class and have that rotate so there's a different student every day. Okay, so that's the seating chart grid on which I fill out information regarding the student's oral participation as well as other miscellaneous information each day. Having completed that, at the end of the day, I take the sheet and I'm going to sit down next to the oral participation evaluation spreadsheet on my computer. I'm going to set it down next to the computer, and let me open up the oral participation evaluation spreadsheet, and I'm going to explain to you how to set it up as well as how to use it on a daily basis. The spreadsheet contains enough room for 6 different classes of 39 students, as you can see. If you by chance should need a more lengthy spreadsheet with room for more classes than that, please email me. I'll be glad to modify it for you and to email the spreadsheet back to you. Now note that each of the cells on this spreadsheet that have a rectangle in the upper right-hand corner have a comment of some kind. As we will go across the first student in each class, you'll find that there are many of these cells that contain comments. And the purpose of this is to define for you what the cell is about, as well as what task you're supposed to perform, what you're supposed to enter into that particular cell. Now this is important because next year you don't want to have to watch this video over again. You can simply refer to the spreadsheet and see the comments within the cells and fill out the spreadsheet, set it up for yourself without having to listen to me again. Nonetheless, we're going to go ahead and simulate the creation or the setting up of a spreadsheet. It doesn't take long. Simulate the creation of a particular class. So you see that in this first cell here off to the left of the students' names, it says insert class period here. And by the way, as we're going through this, you might want to download the spreadsheet, enter the information yourselves, and just follow along with me, stopping the video as you perform each of these different tasks. So I'll put in here 1 for the first class period. The next cell down says enter course name or insert course name. I'll call this French 1. And then the third cell down says insert number of students in class here. I'll make a class of 10 students. And then you see we have 2 cells of a different color. They're gray. Now you will only be able to enter information in cells which are in this dark blue color. And that's intentional because cells of a different color contain formulae. These formulae, if they were to be modified, would cause a spreadsheet not to function. And so I'll show you what happens if I try to add information to a cell which is not in dark blue. For example, this gray cell right here. As soon as I try to type information, I'm told that this cell or chart you're trying to change is on a protected sheet. So I've protected these cells for your own protection so that you would not accidentally ruin the functioning of the spreadsheet. Okay, so I've entered in the information about the class. It's the first period of the day. It's French 1, and there are 10 students. Now I'm going to, as I'm setting up this spreadsheet, I'm going to add the names of the students. And I need to, once again, come up with some fictional names here. Bob, Jim, Mary, Sue, I think were my first students. It doesn't really matter, but Carl, Willie, help me here. Art, Steve, why not, Bill, and another Bob, Bob number 2. I'll put Bob 2 there. Okay. Now I've entered in the students' names. I've entered in the information about the classes. And at this point, in essence, the spreadsheet is ready to function. Now, I'm going to go ahead and explain to you what these different cells are about, but I've actually completed all I need to complete for the moment as far as setting up the spreadsheet. What you could do of a supplementary nature is you see here to the right of this black bar. This black bar separates information about the students from the actual totals as far as oral participation is concerned for each of the students. And so to the right of this black bar right here is where I will enter information as to how many times students participate in class discussion in the course of each day. Well, this is something you could conceivably add in as you're setting up your spreadsheet. However, you probably wouldn't want to go too far with it. I'll explain in a second. This comment right here says record in this row the month of the class discussion in numeric format. So if school starts on, let's say, September 7th, and I start right away with having students participate in class discussion, I'm going to put a 9 here for the month of September. And then just to save some time, I'm going to go ahead and copy across here, or fill across to the right. So this is the month of September for each of these different columns. Each column represents a different day. And then down below I'll put here the day of the month, the 7th of September. And the next, therefore, the Tuesday, if that were a Monday, would be the 8th, the 9th, the 10th, and the 11th of September. There's a weekend, mercifully. And then under the column T, we have the 14th, the 15th, the 16th, the 17th. And now we don't want to go too far in filling these out because you probably won't have a class discussion every single day. You may, but you may not. You also may have days on which either school doesn't take place, there's no class, or maybe you have an assembly and class doesn't meet. And so you might want to not go too far in filling out the dates as you're setting up your spreadsheet. Okay, that's a spreadsheet. Before I show you how simple it is to use this spreadsheet on a daily basis, let me just show you what all of these cells, or the comments regarding each of these cells, have to say. I've already shown you that this first cell is where I indicate the class period, the course name. The third one down is the number of students in the class. And that, by the way, is very important, because your expectation as to the frequency of a student's oral participation is going to be affected by how many students are in the class. Then up here at the top, you see this is where I record my student's name. Now going to the right, these are cells you haven't seen yet. The first one is optional. It is simply where you indicate how many times a student asks to be excused in the course of class period. It doesn't impact their grade whatsoever. It simply is a means for you to keep track if there's a student who's missing too many class periods, or too many segments of class periods. And again, it has no bearing on grade, and it's totally optional. You don't need to fill this out if you don't want to. The next cell is called negative participation. And this has to do with interruptions of instruction. And again, it's totally optional. You don't need to add it if you don't want to. If a student negatively participates in class, I'll add in number 1 here, or one of them. Maybe on the next day he twice interrupts me and distracts other students. I'll change the 1 to a 3 as I accumulate the amount of times a student has interrupted instruction in the course of the marking period. And the next column over is very similar. It's not truly behavior that interrupts or distracts, but you may consider it to be simply not helpful to the instructional process. That's when a student uses his native language in the course of a class. If it is your philosophy that you don't want the native language to be heard whatsoever in the course of the class period, this is where you would record unauthorized use of English or whatever the native language of the student happens to be. And again, it's totally optional. It's up to you based upon your own philosophy of education. However, let's say the student interrupted class on 2 occasions on one particular day, and enter that information in here. Columns D and E, which are both related to negative behaviors of some kind, you need to understand that they do impact the student's grade. They will slightly lower the student's grade on each on the event of each transgression. And so you need to determine, is this really what you want to do? Is this consistent with your own philosophy of education? Okay, I'm going to eradicate those 2 comments right there. And as we go farther across, you see that this column right here or this cell under column H is where I don't need to add information. You can see that it's not in blue, and so I can't modify this cell, but it's where you will see the cumulative total of oral discussions you've had in the course of a marking period. Here is where the total number of a student's comments or contributions, oral participation, will be found for the entire marking period. And again, there's nothing you need to add. That will be added automatically, as you'll see in a moment. And then here we have the oral participation. This is an important column. This is the student's actual grade, you might say, or percentage for oral participation in the course of the marking period. That's why it's in red, because it's really the highlight, I suppose. Now off to the right of the black bar, this is where you're going to actually add the information indicating how many times a student participated in class discussion. And we'll come back to that in a moment. Let me scroll across now to one more section. You see a section here entitled Student Absences. When a student, and by the way, you'll notice that the names of the students automatically have already appeared here. When a student has been absent on a particular day, so that the student's grade would not be hurt by their absence during the course of a class discussion, you'll add in there a capital A to indicate their absence, to say Bob and Carl were both absent on the 7th of September. And you will see that their grade will not be impacted whatsoever by their absence. Their absence will be a neutral factor as far as their grade is concerned. Okay, so this is really all the information you need to know. Each day, once you've set up your classes, once you've got the class period, the name of the course, the quantity of students in the class, and the names of the students within the class entered, you are set to go. That's all the information you need to go to get started. And then every day, you'll never have to modify that information again. Every day, you will simply do one of 2 things. You will add in this section right here, you will add in how many comments a student made in the course of class discussion, and you will add in, off to the far right, any absences that occurred. That's all you do. And the spreadsheet does all the rest for you, as you'll see. Okay, let's assume that It's September 7th, and I've completed my my record-keeping sheet, and I have it off to the side of my keyboard here. And I'm going to add it in the totals as far as participation is concerned for the students in my class right here. So let's say Bob talked on 3 occasions, Jim 8, Mary 2, Sue 3, 9 for Carl. Willie was kind of sheepish, only once. Art 9 times. Steve 15 because it's my favorite name. And then Bill 4 times. And Bob, poor Bob, said nothing, but for a very good reason. Bob was absent. So I go across to the absences here, and I add in this capital A, letter A for Bob. Okay, let's add in just so you get a little fuller idea. And notice how the grades have already begun to appear right here. So I get a little more, a fuller idea of what's actually transpiring as far as the grade is concerned. I'll add in 2 more class periods. So bear with me a second while I add this information in. Willie made a big comeback on that day there. Steve was thinking about baseball from the previous night. He didn't have much to say. And Bill added in 8. And Bob finally showed up. And Bob had 5 comments that he made. And let's go back up and add 1 more day's worth of class, September 9th. And here we go. We'll just do this very quickly. Oh, 28. Mary in her dreams would never said 28 things. Let's see. Let's keep going down here. Art was absent on the 4th. Steve bounced back a little bit there. And we're ready to go. Okay. Now this is information for as far as class participation, the first 3 days. And Art, we said, by the way, was absent on September 9th. I'm going to have to go across and add in Art's absence on September 9th. There we go. Okay. I want to actually show you something. Show you Art's grade. I'm going to lower this a little bit to make it more apparent. Okay, Art's grade is 85. If I don't indicate that Art was absent, okay, remember he had an 85. And I go back now, his absence there looks like he just said nothing in the course of a class discussion. His grade's lowered to 73. That's not fair. So we want to make sure that we add in absence over here so that Art is not penalized for having been sick, the poor guy. Okay. Let me show you 1 or 2 other things here. Notice how when the less that a student says, of course, the lower their grade is going to go. There was another... This is kind of an interesting feature, which you'll find at the bottom of each class period. What if you find that students are particularly lethargic in the course of a class discussion, and they just kind of sit back and don't really want to participate? Well, by the way, if you happen to show them how this spreadsheet works on 1 or 2 occasions, and how just changing a grade or changing a participation to some extent lowers a student's grade, you'll find that they will not very often be lethargic. They'll be competing for the privilege of speaking up in your class. But let's just assume on one particular day the students were lethargic, and you ask a question, and no one even wants to answer it. Well, what I do in that case is to keep them on the edge of their seats, you might say, keep them very actively involved. I answer the question for myself, and when I do that, I have a place where I indicate that on my grid, the chart that it's on that clipboard. Let me show you what happens if let's try and remember this person's grade right. Let's say Bob. Let's say Bob's got a 97. Remember that. If on the 9th of September the whole class is kind of just lethargic, and let's say on 10 occasions I have to answer my own questions. Down here where there's this black bar at the bottom of each day's totals, each day's column. I'm going to add in 10 for me, for my having participated in class discussion. Let's go back up and see what Bob's grade is now. It's 94. He lost 3 points on his grade because I had to answer the questions for the class. Once the students understand that their lethargy results in my answering the questions, which results in their grades all as a group dropping, they will do all they can to keep you from speaking as a teacher. They will remain actively engaged. It's a pretty draconian approach, is it not? But it's critical because you can't afford to let students become lethargic. They need to keep practicing the linguistic skills you're giving them, and you want them to keep you from answering your own questions. You want them to be responding. Of course, you need to find ways to make the questions of a motivational nature, finding things to talk about that are of interest to the students. But nonetheless, there are ways that we have to insist that students respond to our questions, and that's one of them. There's one more little feature I want to show you at the bottom of each of the different classes, which, as you look at these grades, those grades are pretty high. I would be almost kind of embarrassed to have that many. Pleased if the students truly were participating as they should, but maybe a little embarrassed that I might be engaging in grade inflation. So if I look at the grades and I say to myself, this group of kids, they're really not participating that actively. These grades are truly inflated. They don't reflect what the students truly are doing in class, their performance. At the bottom of each of the classes, there's a place that's marked a degree of difficulty, a cell indicating degree of difficulty. This is a place where you can fine-tune your grades. Let me show you. If you put your cursor on that cell there, it says, enter one of the following numbers to adjust the degree of grading difficulty. If I want to make things significantly tougher for my students, right now I have the number 70 in here. I'm not going to explain why the number 70 is there. It doesn't really matter. But it just tells you here that 50 will make things difficult as far as obtaining an outstanding grade is concerned, more challenging. I'm going to enter it in there. I'm going to go up now to the top. Remember how it was Bob had 97? Well, now his grade's only 84. That's tough. Jim, I don't know what Jim's grade was previously, but it's gone down significantly. Well, it must have been the same. He must have had a 97 as well. Mary had 100. Now her grade's only 93. So I can adjust, I can fine-tune the degree of difficulty as far as grading is concerned by means of that cell at the bottom of each section right here. Notice now, let's say I feel that, this is going to be ridiculous, but I feel these grades are too low. These kids deserve far better. I can go down here, and as it says that easy corresponds to 90. I'm going to change 70 to 90, and at this point, everybody practically has 100%, which embarrasses me even more. Okay, well, that's a lot of information I provided you. I hope that the setup was quite comprehensible. You simply fill in information in rows 6, 7, and 8 under column A concerning the class period, the course name, the amount of students in the class. That's a very important factor, by the way. And then you fill in the student names. And then after that, you've done everything as far as setup is concerned. It's just a matter thereafter of adding the information on a daily basis concerning how many times the students participate in class discussion, remembering also to indicate the absences over here so that a student would not be penalized as far as oral participation for having been absent. Well, that's it. I hope you were able to follow all that explanation. Beyond the ULAT itself, I think that this spreadsheet is the most powerful, valuable tool that I've created for myself in my instruction. It's so important because remember the proverb, you can't steer a car until it's moving. And you can't refine students' speech until they're willing to regularly speak. And you need a means by which they feel obliged to speak. You need to get that weight off your own shoulders, get it on theirs to carry the class, make sure the conversation continues. If you have any problems with understanding either how to set up or how to use this spreadsheet, don't hesitate to write me at theulat1@gmail.com.